Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it. Thanks. By the way, I also have a Naruto fanfiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description. Once again by TheVictor, a 7-year-old Luffy is approached by his future self. It seems Luffy's entire crew died on at the hands of Fleet Admiral Akainu, right after defeating the Yonkou Kaido. Follow a much stronger, smarter Luffy as he repeats his adventure, hoping to avoid the same fate as well as correct some mistakes. Warning, OOC, Luffy, godlike. Luffy, smarter, Luffy. I don't own anything, let's get started.
Chapter 44. Uneasy answers. Before you start reading, I've got one announcement. Romance is on. I was kinda encouraged to do it by a few people, so Luffy's Robin is going to happen. Not sure how or when exactly, but it will. There have been a few people going strictly against anything of this type. My message to those people is like it has always been. Romance will never ever get the spotlight in this particular FIC. This won't become a romance FIC. No chapter will be devoted specifically to romance. The thing will be fairly straightforward and lightweight. Limited to occasional moments and comments from the crew. So stop thinking that this Luro crap will overpower the story. If your opposition to romantic development is simply from the viewpoint that Luffy is too innocent and or disinterested, then you should have begun your criticism sooner, as I've pretty much established that Luffy isn't actual in this FIC. Also, I'll put the warning in the description, so that Luna fans won't try to beat me up across the internets. Laughing face. 44. Uneasy answers. It was a cold night. The party was already over. They stayed and slept in the forest across the lake, not too far away from the sacrificial platform on top of which the ship of the Straw Hat Pirates was situated. It wasn't clear who had intruded upon whom, whether the animals or the pirates were intruders, but after a short confrontation, both of them settled around the campfire, which was by now almost burned out. In the middle of his nightmare-plagued sleep, Luffy woke up. He sat up as he was no longer capable of sleep given what he dreamt about. "Captain, my captain," the voice that Luffy had nearly forgotten called again. "What's that?" he thought as he scratched his head. He yawned. "I'm not going to get any sleep anytime soon, and it's probably not even close to morning yet." "Captain, come to me, my captain," the voice called to him. He shrugged and got up. Hey, Luffy, someone else, someone he knew, called to him. He turned around and saw a panicked-looking Usopp. He yawned again. "What is it, Usopp?" he asked. "Did you hear someone speaking?" The sniper looked at him oddly. "What are you talking about?" he asked in confusion. Luffy's eyes widened. "I heard someone calling me," Luffy answered honestly, "third time now." Usopp shook his head. "I haven't heard anything," he replied. "But anyway, Luffy, it's kinda embarrassing, but—" "What is it, Usopp?" he interrupted. "Sekiju," he started, but hesitated, earning an embarrassed blush. "I need to take a leak." Luffy looked at him with a confused expression. "Just go alone." Another voice interrupted with a yawn. "You're not a kid anymore." Hey, I'm not scared at getting deeper in the scary forest, at night." Usopp stuttered, obviously not hiding his fear well. Luffy's look softened. "So you want me to come with you?" he asked. Usopp nodded. He sighed. "Fine," he answered, "but let me warn you that I'm hearing voices." Zoro snickered. "What if one of those voices ordered Luffy to kill you?" Zoro asked in a creepy tone as he turned around, bearing a maniacal grin. Luffy chuckled upon seeing Usopp cringe and pale. The sniper, however, interpreted Luffy's amusement as something else and flinched slightly as Luffy got near him. "Oh, relax, Usopp," Luffy told him. "I'm not going to listen to what some stupid voice is telling me." Usopp relaxed slightly, but flinched again as he looked back at Zoro, who still bore an unsettling grin. "And you?" he said to Zoro. "Stop looking at Usopp like that. Your face is way too scary." "Oi!" Zoro whispered loudly as his grin turned into a scowl and he glared at Luffy. After a moment, he humphed and turned back to the small campfire. Usopp and Luffy made their way deeper into the forest. When Usopp thought he heard something, he flinched. "What's wrong, Usopp?" Luffy asked. Usopp shook his head. "Thought I heard something," he replied. Luffy nodded. He guessed it wasn't that odd to be scared in a place like this. Luffy wasn't scared right now, but from his childhood experiences with the wild, he could definitely understand why his friend was so unnerved. After all, Usopp wasn't as strong as his monstrous crew members, and this was no ordinary forest either. They kept walking. To his relief, Usopp found his presence comforting and wasn't flinching anymore, even though the forest, as any other, kept producing noises of its own. "Captain, my captain," the voice announced again. He stopped. "Didn't you hear that?" he asked his friend. "Hear what?" Usopp asked back. Luffy shook his head and continued to walk, but then Usopp stopped him. He looked confused at Usopp, but in a second, he understood everything. It was the sound of a hammer. It sounded like someone pounded on something with his hammer. "I hear it," he confirmed. That sounds like, Usopp whispered. I know. Luffy interrupted. He sighed. Listen, just take a piss now and we'll check that out after that. Usopp nodded. Stay here, he ordered with a stuttering voice. Luffy simply nodded. He turned around and looked over the trees. Captain, come here, Captain, I'm waiting for you, the voice asked again. The hammering continued. Could it be, Luffy thought, but shook his head after a while. It sounds different, it's not the same, similar, but not the same. Usopp finished after a moment. I heard it again, Luffy announced. Usopp looked at him. How does it sound like? He asked as they continued towards the sounds. The voice? Luffy asked. Usopp nodded. It sounds like the voice of a child, he answered. Usopp paled at this. Why you're not making that up, are you? He stuttered. This sounds like something from a horror story. Luffy laughed. Hey, don't laugh at me, he whispered loudly. It keeps calling me Captain. Luffy told him. Usopp quirked a curious eyebrow, and inviting me to come closer. Usopp looked down on the ground. Luffy could see that Usopp was frightened. Don't worry, he said with a smile. Nothing bad will happen. But, Luffy, Usopp protested. This sounds like something straight from a horror story. Luffy snickered. Hey, Usopp. He replied cheerfully. What do you think it is? A dead little girl that's come to kill us? Usopp paled even more, color leaving his face completely. Don't say that, he protested. Luffy looked at him with a quirked eyebrow. So I was right? He asked with a smirk, but then he looked at Usopp with a more serious expression. Look, not many things can harm a pirate crew as strong as ours. Luffy continued. And I'm pretty sure we could take on a little girl any day. There was silence for a few moments. The hammering grew louder, as did the voice. Captain, after a moment they found the ship. They were very near as the hammer was loud. It was coming from the ship. They looked at the ship and could not believe what they saw. Ghost! Usopp yelled and pointed at the small figure, which did look like a ghost. Even Luffy was unnerved by this. His friend hid behind him. The ghost-like figure turned around and showed its unclear white face. The only thing visible were the big eyes and the wide grin, very similar to his own. Mary? He asked himself. Could that be Mary? Luffy, it's a ghost. Usopp stuttered. I'm gonna talk to it. Luffy announced. Usopp paled. But, Luffy, he looks friendly, Luffy replied. Then he turned his head to Usopp, who was still behind him. Look, if you're scared then go back to Zoro. But, I'll be okay. Luffy interrupted and smiled. Usopp slowly let go of him and turned around, then he ran back to the encampment. As soon as he saw Usopp leave, Luffy flung himself onto the ship. The small ghost figure turned around. Luffy was surprised to see that the figure looked no different up close as it did from afar. It was a man made of blinding white light. Luffy could only discern the most basic humanoid features. Captain! The little man yelled in a childish voice but his hands passed through Luffy. His grin faded in obvious disappointment at being unable to touch him. Are you? Luffy started. I'm Mary. The ghost chirped out in a cheerful voice, regaining his smile. But how can I hear your voice? How can I talk to you? He asked. Captain, you have the ability to hear the voice of things. The little man explained. He dropped the hammer on the ground. Mary's voice sounds different. Luffy thought. I am different, the man replied. Luffy stared at him wide-eyed. What's wrong, my captain? The ghost asked. I just answered to you. But I didn't say anything. Luffy answered. The ghost tilted his head. Yes you did. He answered. But I didn't say anything. I only thought about it, Luffy yelled in disbelief. The ghost scratched his head with his hand. Said, thought? He asked. What's the difference? Luffy could only stare dumbly at the figure. After a moment, he recomposed himself. You said you were different? Luffy asked. Different from when? Your previous life of course, Captain. The ghost announced in a cheerful voice like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Luffy's eyes went wide. How do you know about that? He asked. You're my captain, the ghost announced. I know my captain. But how can you know these things? Luffy nearly shouted. The little man scratched his head again. Don't know, he announced after a minute. I just know all my captain knows and what my friends know. Luffy's eyes widened again. You know everything? He asked with a disbelieving expression. You know about Ace and the crew and everything that's happened? Yes, the ghost yelled. Luffy just stared at him. But how? He asked. Don't know, the ghost interrupted. Why are you different thought? He asked after a moment. You're less childish, the little man offered. Luffy shrugged, but then nodded. My captain is different, so I'm different, the ghost replied cheerfully. Luffy just blinked a few times. Then he suddenly realized something. If he could talk to Mary, then that meant. I'm dying. The little ghost answered to his thoughts. Luffy was again startled, both by the bluntness and the revelation itself. But how? He asked with wide eyes. I made sure to take care of half of the iron spears and I beat up Bellamy before he could do anything. I'm dying. The little man repeated. I wish I could go on adventures with you forever, but I can't. Luffy looked down. I failed again. I thought I could prevent all my mistakes, but… This is not something you could have prevented, Captain. The childish voice interrupted. Luffy looked up and a tear dropped down his cheek. But if I was stronger, No, the ghost interrupted. You couldn't have. It was meant this way. There was silence for a few moments. You can't control everything, my captain. The ghost told him, and you shouldn't try. I'm sorry, Mary. He whispered. You always knew this was going to happen. The ghost told him. I could never reach the new world, let alone survive in it. Silence lingered for a few more moments. How'd I tell them? He asked and looked down. Just say the truth. In the morning, everyone was startled to find Luffy staring at a random direction. When he turned to them, everyone could see he had bloodshot eyes. When asked about it, he confirmed what Usopp had said about the ghost, but refused to say what happened afterward. He didn't think it was wise for him to break the news about the ship in his current state. Speaking about the ship, the ghost had repaired it. Like last time. This was another startling, but not unwelcome discovery for the crew. To their relief, the crew found that Luffy wasn't aggressive or very irritable, like he usually was when he got no sleep. He was just gloomy. Sad. After an uncharacteristically quiet breakfast, the crew divided into two groups. The group that would take care of the ship, which included Usopp, Sanji and Nami, and the group that would look for gold, which was composed of Luffy, Zoro, Robin and Chopper. After a few basic instructions, Luffy felt that it was his job to add a few things. Hey guys, he announced. Listen up, everyone looked at him. If you meet this guy, Luffy began. Don't attack him, even if he provokes you. Everyone looked at him in confusion. He's bound to be very powerful, so, leave him to me, he concluded. Then he looked at Sanji. Sanji, I'm counting on you to protect Nami and Usopp, he told him. Sanji nodded. I'll make sure Nami Swan doesn't get hurt, he announced while doing his noodle dance. And Usopp, Luffy added. Whatever, Sanji replied. Luffy smirked. He knew that although Sanji was very rough and dismissive of his male crew members, he would still do whatever he could to help them. Plus, he seemed very protective of the long-nosed sniper. After going deeper into the forest and barely escaping the gigantic python, which he didn't really want to fight, since he later learned that he was not such a bad guy, Snake, that he appeared to be, Luffy found himself alongside Robin as she searched for the ruins of the City of Gold, which was supposed to be somewhere on the upper yard. It was really the only place he could think of being. He knew that if went with either Chopper or Zoro, he'd likely be overprotective of them. He knew they had gotten very messed up by their respective opponents, and that would have prevented them from improving as much as they could. Still, however far away he was, he'd run to them if he thought they were in too much danger. Observation haki and future knowledge were both a blessing and curse. He knew what was going to happen. He knew they were going to be fine, but still, after seeing them all dead once, he couldn't help but be worried about them. He convinced himself to trust in their strength. They handled this before, they can do it again. Robin was searching for the ruins, but it was obvious that she wasn't that much into it at that very moment. He knew she had something to say, and he knew he wouldn't like it, and he was right. Captain San? She asked, but didn't turn around. What is it, Robin? He asked. I know you're hiding something, she answered, his eyes widened. Oh, crap. He thought. You're impossibly powerful, Captain San, and you know things you couldn't possibly know, she continued. They stopped. After a moment she turned around and looked at him. He tilted his head on the side and looked at her with an expression as confused as he could muster. What do you mean? He asked her. She shook her head. Don't try to fool me, she told him. I'm not an idiot, Captain San. I never said you were, he told her. You look like you're 16, she started, and yet you often act as the oldest of us. I'm 17, he corrected her. Not the point, she told him. You're 17 and yet you can fight with Dracul Mahawk on equal terms. You seem to know a lot about everywhere you go and yet you don't look like the learning type. You have nightmares about everyone dying on a regular basis. He looked at her. So I'm hiding something? He asked her. She nodded. He smirked. From the moment I got you on crew, Robin, I knew you would be the hardest to keep things from, he told her. Her eyes widened. Then what? She started. But I can't tell you anything about it, he interrupted. Not yet. She looked at him with a small smirk. That makes me even more interested in your past, Captain San, she asked him. He sighed. He looked her in the eyes and she flinched. Flashback. She laid on the ground. She was still alive, but it was obvious she didn't have much longer. She laid in her own blood. Her arms were burnt. She obviously tried to use them to at least somewhat restrain the murderous admiral. Luffy, she whispered, unable to raise her voice. Robin, he answered with tears in his eyes. There's still time, I can. No, she interrupted. I'm sorry, I won't be alive much longer. He stayed silent, respecting her unspo. Luffy, she told him. Thank you for saving me when I wanted to die." She smiled. It was the best thing that anyone had ever done for me. A tear slipped from his eye. She noticed that and her expression softened. "What happened to you?" she asked. "Death," he answered and looked away. "That's what happened. Everyone died." They continued their search in silence. Chapter 45. The all-powerful God appears. Notice how the story quality has suddenly outrageously dropped like a stone ever since I announced that I'll be doing romance. Also, romance has become such a huge and distracting part of the story. So distracting in fact that you can't even discern the actual storyline anymore. There's romantic drama everywhere. Wiper has suddenly fallen in love with Pierre and Zoro and Shanks have been caught having Den Den Mushi SX. Whatever that looks like, while Chopper has proposed to Robin, which she is unable to reject due to being afraid of hurting his feelings. Luffy of course thinks Robin actually loves Chopper, so he's in turn proposed to Usopp to get over her. Nami secretly loves Sanji, but is afraid of rejection, so she doesn't ask him about it, while he interprets her odd behavior around him as merciless mockery against his boundless love towards her, so he in turn proposes to Konis, who accepts his proposal, but is actually really in love in Enel, who loves himself. Also, Whitebeard has always had a crush on Vice Admiral Suru and Marco has a crush on Ace, who secretly loves Luffy. Many people besides Ace and Robin also love Luffy, like Sabo, Law and Kid. Somehow after seeing his picture, Mihawk, Hancock, he appears naked in her dreams despite her not knowing who he is. Dragon, Enel's other personality, Shira, Luffy's fiery fist touched his heart. And many, many others. How will Luffy solve all this in the epic romantic story of Once Again? Yes, this is what this story has become after my announcement of an eventual simple straightforward hookup between Luffy and Robin. Notice how there's no sarcasm in this section at all. None. Hey, what is that anyway? This is my answer to the accusation that romance will ruin and disrupt this story and that this story will jump the shark because of the romance and everything will crush and burn. Also, I've been told that romance is a useless addition. I agree with that. Also, my whole story is useless. One could argue that the whole fanfiction site is useless. I mean it doesn't really help solve the hunger in Africa or anything. If you don't like the 2 sentences of romance per chapter, then I think you should find something else to read. 45. The all-powerful god appears whilst the pirates continued to search for the City of Gold. A battle between the god's enforcers and Shandians took place. The little war was nothing at all against what was to come, but both sides were hostile to the pirates and their ranks consisted of enough people who could challenge them on at least somewhat equal terms. God Enel was zipping around, taking out people that he was interested in taking out, encountering no real opposition to his overwhelmingly powerful Logia devil fruit. Although he had lost 2 and not just one of his priests the previous day, he was unconcerned, treating everything as the perfect game to ease his boredom. Luffy continued following Robin, although he personally wasn't very interested in the ruins. They found some ruins and God's enforcers that dared to even touch them in a not enough careful manner, were dealt with swiftly and painfully by disembodied arms. "You know, I don't know why you keep following me if you're upset with me, Captain San," Robin asked after they reached yet another small ruin of history. "I'm not upset, Robin," he answered. She turned around and looked at him. "You certainly seem that way," she told him. He shook his head. "I'm just thinking about something," he told her. "Your past?" she asked. "I'm sorry if I brought out some painful memories." "Nah," he answered. "I always think about that anyway." She quirked an eyebrow, but they were interrupted from any further conversation by footsteps approaching them. My, what a lovely young lady," a voice announced. Both of them turned around. Behind them stood a mountain of a man. He had long black hair as well as several chins, which Luffy immediately noticed. "Are you another one of God's servants?" she asked. He seemed offended by this as he took a threatening step forward. "Shut that insolent mouth of yours," he threatened in a reprimanding tone. "I'm the chief enforcer in the service of God Enel. My name is Yama." "And what do you want here, Chief Enforcer San?" she asked in a non-offensive tone. "You'll see soon enough," he yelled out with an evil smirk. "Me." Luffy's sweat dropped, while Robin just stared at him. Several birds flew away from the nearby trees. Seriously, Luffy thought, but then he smirked. "So, will you tell us what you want, Mountain Stomach?" Luffy chirped out in a cheerful voice. Robin looked at him in bewilderment. "Has anyone ever told you that you are way too blunt?" she asked. Luffy just grinned. "Oh, yes," he answered. "Plenty of times." She just shook her head with a slight smile. The head enforcer was less than pleased however. "You'll pay for those insolent words, boy," he yelled and jumped in the air. He was surprisingly fast and agile for such an obese man. "Drop Mountain," the obese man announced, and as the name of the technique suggested, dropped straight at Luffy. The Straw Hat Pirate quickly took a thumb of his right hand in his mouth and bit it. "Gear third," he announced and blew air into his hand and it inflated in size. After enlarging it, Luffy simply grabbed the fast-approaching mountain man and restrained him with it. "Hey!" Yama yelled from the fist, squirming in his grip. "Let me go." Luffy turned to his companion. "I figured you wouldn't be too happy if he destroyed the ruins," he told her. "Where should I put him down?" Robin blinked a few times and then pointed into the distance away from the ruins. They made their way in that direction. After they left the ruins, Luffy turned to Robin. "What should I do with him?" he asked her. Both of them looked at the squirming Yama in his hand. "I wonder how long it would take to clean the blood off your hand if you squeezed him to death," she asked in a totally emotionless tone. His eyes bulged out. "Seriously, Robin," Luffy yelled at her, "that's just yucky." She just chuckled at his expression. Luffy pouted and set the obese man down on the ground. Yama panted for a minute and then looked angrily at Luffy, who was undisturbed by his glare. "Now apologize to Robin for trying to hump her ruins," Luffy ordered in a childish voice. Robin laughed behind him. The chief enforcer fumed angrily in front of him. "Drop mountain," he yelled and jumped in the air, attempting to drop straight on Luffy. The pirate moved out of the way however, and when he jumped the third time, arms sprouted from the nearby tree and grabbed him. After that, the combined power of many arms slammed the man into the tree trunk in front of him and he slid down on the ground. After a few minutes of bone breaking, slamming and dropping, the chief enforcer was dealt with. Luffy didn't interfere, although he thought that if he did, it'd be way less painful for the obese man. It's so good to be rubber. Robin and Luffy then found a big ruined building, with stairs leading to the top. Robin seemed very excited upon finding it and ran ahead, while Luffy followed behind her. She cleared the island cloud which prevented passage to the lower levels. When they reached the lower levels and exited them, they realized they had reached Shandora, the city of gold. Except there was no gold anywhere in sight. Meanwhile, Chopper had defeated the priest named Gadatsu and climbed the giant beanstalk also known as Giant Jack. Upon arriving there however, he was quickly disposed of by the remaining priest, Ohm. After a while, Zoro, Wiper, Gonfall as well as numerous foot soldiers from both of the warring sides also arrived on the scene and a three-way battle between Zoro, Wiper and Ohm commenced. Wiper as well as Ohm were hostile to everyone present except their own soldiers. Zoro focused on Ohm, but was forced to fight Wiper as well, while Gonfall tried to fight Ohm until he was swallowed by another newcomer on the scene. The giant snake naturally knew her name. After a hard and destructive battle, Zoro had defeated Ohm. Wiper prepared to fight him, while Nola kept harassing all of them, being no doubt the most powerful being on that battlefield. As Robin and Luffy explored the ruins, the crackling of electricity interrupted them. Luffy immediately noticed the new presence. The self-proclaimed god Enel sat on a nearby ruin. He was luxuriously dressed with bits of golden jewelry decorating his body. Luffy was intrigued by the drums attached to his back as well as his horrifically long earlobes. He smirked and took a bite of his apple. This finally snapped Robin out of her thoughts. "Yahahaha, magnificent, isn't it?" he announced in his arrogant voice. Even after being shot into the sky, the great ancient city still exists in all its grandeur. Shandora. But even a city of legend cannot display its splendor when it's obstructed by clouds. He took another bite. "I discovered it. My idiotic predecessors never even found it," he continued. Robin now turned around to face him. "And you are?" she asked. "I think that's pretty clear, Robin," Luffy told her quietly. The man on the ruin smirked. "I am God," he replied simply. He took another large bite from the apple. "Both of you have impressed me." He looked at Robin. "You have managed to find the city so incredibly quickly," he told her. "A task that took us many months to complete. I see that they are simple to find if you can just read the inscriptions." Then he looked at Luffy. "And you," he told him. "You managed to defeat one of the powerful priests with just one punch. Of course that means nothing against the power of God, but I commend you on your strength regardless. What I don't understand is why you came with her instead of helping your Nakama fight." Luffy smirked. "It's simple, really," he answered. "If I protect them too much, they'll stay in my shadow. They must fight their own battles so that they'll become as strong as me someday." An impressive answer. Enel commended. "So this is mere training for your lackeys?" Luffy nodded. "Essentially yes, except they're not lackeys," he replied. "Whatever you think of them, you needn't have bothered coming here. The gold you so desire is no longer here. You're a few years too late for that," Enel told him. "Gold?" Robin interjected. "Now that you mention it, there isn't any, so it was you who took it?" "Yahahaha. That's how it should be, isn't it?" he asked them as he ate the rest of the apple. "After all, whom better befits such an illustrious metal than God himself?" Luffy scowled. "This guy is getting on my nerves," he thought. "God this, God that, oh, I'm so goddamn godly." "Then may I assume you also took the golden bell?" Robin inquired after a few moments. This surprised the man slightly. Golden bell?" he asked her. "He doesn't know about it?" she thought. "This is very interesting," he continued. "What did you learn by reading those glyphs?" "No, unfortunately, if it wasn't here when you arrived, then it never made it to the sky," Robin answered. It's here. Luffy interrupted. Both of them looked at him. It must be here. If it wasn't, Cricketo-san would probably have found it. Not necessarily. Robin started. No, he's right. The self-proclaimed god interrupted her. When this land arrived into the sky 400 years ago, a bell could be heard ringing throughout the land, so it's definitely here. He paused for a moment. The elders of this land called it the Song of the Island, he continued. So that bell was made of gold. That's splendid. There was silence for a few moments. That's splendid. Enel repeated. Yahahaha, I suggest we search for it while we wait. Yahahaha. He laughed for a while, but after a few moments, his amusement was replaced by an annoyed expression. I hear a maggot on the edge of the island, he murmured. Luffy looked at him in confusion. I can't actually hear people's conversations. The best I can do is sense strong emotion and intent. He thought. Is this guy's observation hockey actually stronger than mine, or is it because of his devil fruit? After a while his eyes darkened and he gained a scowl. His body also started crackling with electrical energy. He stood up from the ruin and raised his hand. What are you? Robin yelled. Electricity continued to build in Enel's left hand and soon it shot upwards. Almost at the same moment, Luffy sensed a strong discharge of energy somewhere on the island. What followed it was a strong sense of sadness and despair from a familiar aura. He gritted his teeth in anger, his right hand blackened. What was that? Robin asked in a panicked voice. Enel's body stopped crackling with energy and he dropped his arm. He smirked. Mercy. He answered in his arrogant voice. I extended a hand of salvation to a maggot writhing in pain and set his free. Isn't that what God does? It seems the girl is still running about, but that's not really important. It's time for everyone to learn of the celebration after all. They will all know despair. Robin looked nervously at the self-proclaimed god. This man possesses a logia type of devil fruit, she thought. She glanced at Luffy, who kept glaring at his enemy. Now then, Enel interrupted her thoughts. It's time to finish this, isn't it? We're running short on time. The final plan is ready to be executed. Final plan? Robin repeated. The god simply smirked again and raised his free hand. It's time, he yelled. Appear before me, lowly mortals, Sango. A strong blast of electrical energy was shot upwards and hit the island cloud around the beanstalk above. The place crumbled and pieces of the island cloud as well as ruins started falling from the sky. Enel simply grinned as the ones above panicked as they were falling. I have sent an invitation for your Nakama to come to Shandora. Yahahaha, the god wannabe announced. This man's ability, Robin said as she watched with widened eyes the carnage above. What terrifying power. She then glanced at Luffy, who kept his eyes on Enel. It was obvious that he was still mad, but his fist was no longer hockey-infused. He seems calm, she thought. Is he not even unnerved by this display of power? They ran out of the way as the ruins crashed down, along with the people and the giant snake. As the snake flew down, several people emerged from its open mouth. The Knight of the Sky along with his partner and after that Nami with the small girl, named Isa, on a waver. What's she doing here? Luffy thought as he saw Nami crashing into the ground. Near him, someone lifted a giant stone with his hand and threw it away from himself. Both Luffy and Robin looked at the man, who happened to be Zoro. Swordsman-san, Robin yelled. Couldn't breathe. Zoro complained. Luffy snickered. Did you fall down with the ruins? She asked him. Damn it, he cursed. I almost died. Robin's sweat dropped. You know, most people would have, she told him. You know, Zoro, I think I got an idea for my next battle entrance. She, he told them. Robin looked at him with widened eyes. You're going to fall from the sky? She asked him in disbelief. He nodded. She, should be fun, he replied. Zoro nearly fell down because of his answer. Ow, 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 another girlish voice announced. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice. Nami stood up from the ground and headed towards them while massaging her rear. The knight, Gonfall, followed her and after him the small Shandian girl. Since when is falling from the sky fun, Luffy? She asked as she glared at him. He simply laughed. If you're rubber it is, he told her. She simply shook her head. By the way, is Chopper okay, Zoro? He asked after a few moments. The first mate set the doctor down on the ground and checked his pulse. He's fine, he replied after a while, but he's pretty beaten up. Luffy nodded and turned to Nami. Take care of Chopper, Nami, he told her. She simply nodded and took him in her hands. By the way, where are we? She asked. City of Gold, she told her. Nami looked angrily at Luffy. Where's the gold? She seethed, though her tone lacked her usual venom, no doubt from the tiredness. Luffy, you promised. It's not my fault, Nami, Luffy replied. God took it. God, she repeated fearfully. He's here? Luffy pointed at the said man, who simply sat on a ball of island cloud and observed them. He looked in her direction and she shrieked and hid behind Luffy. Between the Straw Hats, the warrior Wiper, the only remaining Shandian stood. He looked around in disbelief, clearly not expecting to find the lost city of Shandora so suddenly. "Is this our home?" he asked aloud. "Shandora?" The snake was also looking around, having lost its aggressiveness for the moment. After a few moments it did what nobody had expected it to do. It actually started crying. Enel punished it for its foolishness by blasting it with electricity. Enel then proceeded to mock the remaining Shandian warrior, telling him that everything was just a game. "A game?" the warrior repeated with disgust. "Yes, game." The god replied with a mocking smirk. "An innocent little game. And those behind you are the contestants." He looked behind him and the others approached to stand alongside him. He scowled at their arrival, but didn't do anything. Nami held Chopper and hid behind a wall, pulling Iso with her despite her protests. "I welcome you, spirited survivors," Enel announced arrogantly. "I commend you for making it this far." He was amused by their glaring expressions and laughed. "Yahahaha. What is it?" he asked mockingly. "I just had a little fun. 3 hours from when this began. There will only remain a handful of the 80 people who entered. It was the survival game." Luffy smirked as he remembered that most of those fighting actually survived it, except they were knocked out for a long time afterward. "It included myself," he continued, interrupting Luffy's thoughts. "Some joined afterward, but I've included them as well. I participated. There would be 5 survivors, but it seems there are 3 more." The fact that Nami and Iso were hiding behind a ruin didn't escape his notice. "So what will you do? Will you choose amongst yourselves, or should I be the one to choose?" he asked. This of course didn't amuse any of the ones present. Enel looked at each of them and smirked in amusement. He obviously didn't really believe they would accept his offer. They all announced that he should be the only one to go and pointed their weapon of choice at him, except for Luffy, who just sort of stood there. "And you?" Enel asked mockingly as he looked at him. "Won't you make me disappear?" "I think a practical example on how to deal with annoying jerks like you is in order," he announced and smirked. The god seemed amused by his attitude and laughed. "Your insolence is amusing, but not very healthy," he replied and turned around. Ignoring their defiance, he then proceeded to explain his plans to them and what he had done so far. Of course, this enraged them further and the former god, Gonfall, finally snapped after being told of how the current god dealt with his former subordinates. He ran forward towards Enel with his lance to impale his enemy, but the self-proclaimed god simply laughed, threw his golden staff in the air and motioned to his chest invitingly. When the lance ran through him, his body simply reformed back and he prepared to blast the former god with electricity, but Luffy quickly pushed the man into the ground. Everyone, including both of gods, looked at Luffy, whose arm simply snapped back into position. "Oh, this is surprising." "Yahahaha." Enel laughed. "Why are you protecting this hopeless old man? What's he to you? He is not one of your nakama?" Luffy smirked. "Maybe not, but he is a friend," he replied, and he helped Chopper. "You," Gonfall whispered from the ground. "Meh, it doesn't matter anymore," Enel announced. "The preordained time has come to pass and there are still too many survivors. How could God have been wrong?" He looked at the 4 people who stood against him, looking at the face of each one of them separately. "Yahahaha. Regardless, will you now accompany me to the world of dreams, survivors, to Fairy Verth?" he asked. "I'm feeling generous, so you may all join me?" He looked on the ground where Gonfall laid. "Even you, former god, Gonfall." "Yahahaha," he told him. Gonfall clenched his fist in anger. Nay," he began. "What if we refused?" Robin interrupted. Enel looked at her oddly. "Why would refuse? I decided that," he replied. "If you remain here, you'll fall into the abyss along with this land." "You could do that with your power," Robin began. "But if you meaninglessly destroy this land, then the object which you seek will also be destroyed." "The golden bell, right?" he asked with an amused smirk. "Yahahaha, you don't need to worry about that. I've traced your steps and I now know there's only one place where it could still be. I believe we have the same conclusion, don't we?" His face then lost its amusement. "How unexpected," he growled. "You thought you could fool God with this kind of information." His right hand began surging with energy. He lifted it and pointed his index finger at her, and at its tip the electrical energy concentrated itself. "I hate manipulative women," he murmured. Robin looked in horror as lighting traveled towards her, but at the last minute someone jumped in front of her, taking the blast. "Luffy," she screamed. She backed away slightly and shielded herself from the power. When the lightning ceased, everyone looked at Luffy. Enel gaped at him in disbelief, and the same was with the others. He turned around and looked at the astonished Robin. He smiled. "You called me Luffy," he told her and grinned. She blinked a few times. "Hey, are you okay?" she stuttered. He narrowed his eyes. "Are you okay, who?" he asked. "Are you okay or not, Captain San?" she asked. He pouted. "You were supposed to say Luffy," he whined. "I don't think this is the best time for this, Luffy," she told him. He grinned and turned around to face his gaping enemy once again. "How are you okay after that, Luffy?" Zoro asked. He laughed. She, while I'm rubber," he announced. The Straw Hats got a look of understanding. I don't know what this rubber is, but nothing surpasses lighting, Enel yelled. Luffy turned around once again and looked at his first mate. Zoro, he told him. He looked him in the eyes and then quickly glanced with his eyes in the distance. Got it. Zoro whispered. He grabbed Robin by her hand and dragged her away from the scene. Then when he passed Nami, he grabbed her as well and they all got a short distance away from him and Enel. Luffy then looked at Wiper. I suggest you also get away from here, he told him. The man glared at him, but then sighed. If you think you can beat him, then knock yourself out, he seethed, but after Enel is gone, I'll settle things with you Blue Sea Dwellers. Upon hearing this, Luffy was the one to sigh. I have no grudge with you, he replied. Wiper growled. You're here on our land, he yelled. You're looking to take what is ours. Luffy started. As entertaining as your little chats have been, I've grown a bit tired of them, Enel announced and directed his palm at them. Thor, he roared and a massive electric blast headed towards them. Luffy inflated his stomach to cover more ground and shield the other man. As the lightning ceased, Luffy's stomach returned to normal and he turned around to the other man who stared in shock. Why did you protect me? He asked. Luffy grinned. If I hadn't, then his attack would have hit you, he replied cheerfully. The Shandian stared at him for a few moments, shook his head and then ran away from them. Luffy once again turned to face the self-proclaimed god. He glanced at the knight, who lay on the ground with Enel's foot on him. I need to first get him away from the weird old man, he thought. Then his eyes glanced to Enel's face and he nearly freaked out. An expression that clearly did not suit Enel. His eyes were as wide as they possibly could have been, his jaw was close to the ground and snot was running from his nose. Luffy smirked. So I guess this is what Giant Osan means when he says snot-nosed brat. Chapter 46. The answer is Rubberman. 46. The answer is Rubberman. Enel stood in the middle of the ruins with his foot on top of Gonfall, towering over the man. The three Straw Hats as well as Wiper watched from the distance at the two men who faced each other. Enel had just about calmed down and stared at his unarmed foe. How can he be immune to lightning? He thought as he gritted his teeth. There is no living thing in the world that doesn't fear lightning, apart from me of course. But I'm God. He looked at Luffy, who continued to glare at him. I've seen him stretch. I don't know what this rubber is, but it seems it gives him the ability to stretch his body a considerable distance. He thought. It's a devil fruit, most likely Paramecia. You know. Luffy began and startled him from his thoughts. There are plenty of people on the Blue Sea who could defeat you. He smirked. And yet you call yourself God, Enel. Luffy finished. Enel scowled. Insolent brat. He thought. They stared at each other for a few more moments. Enel seemed reluctant to attack. He knew the man before him had an immunity to his lightning powers. After a moment, said man smirked and pulled his right hand back. Gomu Gomu no, he announced and ran towards him. Enel shook his head repeatedly. Calm down, he thought to himself. Even if he is immune to my power, physical attacks won't affect my body. Pistol. Luffy completed and delivered a heavy punch into his gut. It wasn't hockey infused, but it still connected with the lightning body. Enel was blasted away from the old man underneath him and crashed into a ruin. Luffy helped the old man get back to his feet. How did you manage to hit him? Gonfall asked in astonishment. Luffy grinned. I'm rubber, he replied cheerfully. Gonfall looked at him in confusion, but then shook his head and headed toward the rest of the observers. Hey, how can he hit Enel? Wiper asked Zoro. Does he have Kairoseki, sea stone, on him or what? Zoro shook his head. He doesn't, he replied and smirked. He's just rubber. Wiper looked at him in confusion. What's this rubber you keep talking about? He asked. Robin looked at him. It's surprising that you don't know about it, she replied. But basically, rubber is a substance which doesn't conduct electricity, so lightning can't harm Luffy. They looked back at the battle scene, where Enel had finally gotten up. Don't get conceited, he yelled and charged towards Luffy with his golden staff. If I see that something won't work, then I'll just change my strategy. He attempted to smack his head with the staff, but Luffy ducked. Then he attempted to hit him into the ground, but Luffy jumped up in the air. Enel smirked and smacked upwards, hitting Luffy straight into the crotch. All the observers winced and Zoro unconsciously shielded his crotch with his free hand. Enel truly is a devil, Gonfall commented with one of his eyes closed. It seemed as if for one moment he could feel Luffy's pain. You said it, old man. Zoro agreed, wearing a similar expression. Luffy was sent flying into air by the strong hit and after a while he stopped by kicking the air. I wonder if Captain San will be still able to have children after this one. Robin commented in an emotionless tone. You damn woman, Zoro growled. She chuckled. It isn't funny, it hurts like hell. For once I agree with Zoro, Nami said with widened eyes. It did look painful. Luffy landed on the ground. Despite being hit where he seemed unaffected. He was rubber after all. He glared at Enel. Scratching another man's balls is kinda, well, gay. he thought to himself. Enel ran towards him with his staff and smacked down on him. But Luffy sidestepped it. The self-proclaimed god then lifted his staff and smacked with it sideways, attempting to hit Luffy's head. The staff was blocked by Luffy's right hand. Enel then raised his left hand, which was free at the time, and pointed the palm at Luffy. Thor! He yelled, and a huge electric blast was released from his palm straight into Luffy, who stayed at the spot. By now, Enel knew that lightning wouldn't hurt Luffy, but that was not his intention. The electrical discharge sent Luffy tumbling backward, but he quickly regained his position. However, that was Enel's intention. The self-proclaimed god was already at him and had raised his staff with both hands and smacked Luffy across the head, sending him flying into the distance. However, he didn't stop there. Just as the pirate was about to crash into a ruin, he appeared above him using his lightning-fast speed and hit him into the ground. Nami, who was among the observers, looked at Zoro with uncertainty, but he just smirked, so she didn't say anything. Enel jumped backwards, away from Luffy. He thought he had at least damaged his opponent somewhat. He did not really expect to have defeated Luffy with those hits, but he did think that he would at least have trouble standing up or would be a bit bloodied. What he did not expect was for Luffy to simply jump back into a standing position without the slightest sign of any damage. Sure, he looked dirtied and his clothes were a little charred because of the lightning, but he looked perfectly fine. That won't work either. Luffy smirked. Enel's eyes widened. Lightning won't work, he muttered. Physical attacks won't work. Just what is rubber? He sighed. No, wait. He's a simple paramecia. I've already seen what he can do. He continued quietly, believing Luffy doesn't hear him. The pirate smirked. Along with observation haki, his hearing has improved tremendously. After all, the first step to mastering observation is often to train your senses. Enel laughed. If I can't harm you with a staff, then I'll use something else. The self-proclaimed god announced pompously. Lightning surrounded the golden staff. Gloam paddling, he announced, and the staff changed its shape into a trident. I have no time to play with the likes of you, Enel yelled and charged at Luffy, who dodged the trident. Yahahaha, as I thought. You are vulnerable to piercing attacks, he announced with his arrogant voice. Yeah, Luffy confirmed. Nami face palmed after hearing that. Idiot, she yelled with razor-sharp teeth. Don't tell him that. Zoro chuckled. Relax, Nami. He told her, it's not like he can take on Luffy. Luffy continued to dodge the trident for a few moments, and then when he finally got tired of dodging, he pulled back both of his arms and prepared to attack. Gomu Gomu no Bazooka. Luffy yelled as his arms snapped into the front to execute his most powerful normal attack. The self-proclaimed god moved back with the power of lighting and successfully dodged the blow. Luffy smirked. He relaxed his posture somewhat, leaving his arms hanging. So, what do you call a man who defeats a god? He asked and grinned. His opponent gritted his teeth in anger and lunged forward, barely missing Luffy with his sharp weapon. There is no such man, he yelled in anger. Luffy pulled back his right fist. Armament, he murmured, and the fist blackened. He punched forward, but Enel turned into lightning, avoided the punch and appeared behind him. God can't be defeated by a mere man, much less a simple paramecia. Enel smirked arrogantly and stabbed forward with his trident. Luffy raised his right foot and kicked the air beneath it. In doing so, he still used too much force and accidentally sent himself flying into the air, but he stopped himself by turning around and kicking the air above him with his outstretched right leg. Again, he used an inappropriate amount of force since he still had very little idea on how much was required. He was sent flying toward the ruins. Just as he was about to crash, he grabbed hold of one of the larger ruined buildings and stopped himself. He twisted his body around in a way that would be unnatural to anyone but him and threw himself in Enel's direction. The logia appeared before him in the air with the trident pointed in his direction, expecting Luffy to impale him's the air underneath him, and with that he flung himself above Enel, preventing himself from getting into contact with the weapon. Enel turned into lightning and appeared above him and stabbed underneath, but Luffy dodged and grabbed the trident from the side, raised it in the air together with Enel and threw them both into the ground. Enel did not crash into ground, as he turned into lightning a moment before doing so. He was back at Luffy again. The rubber man stretched his right leg sideways and whipped Enel from the right with it. The logia spat out blood as he finally stopped himself in the air. He glared at Luffy, who motioned for him to come get him with a smirk. He lunged toward his opponent with his trident. Luffy again sidestepped the weapon, but then punched forward with right hand. The self-proclaimed god turned into lightning and moved backward, but while he was able to avoid most of the damage, he still got hit. He reformed back into his body and spat out more blood. Zoro smirked as he watched from the ruins. That lighting bastard has no chance against Luffy, he thought. He can barely even keep up with him. How can this battle be happening? Gonfall asked as he saw Luffy stop himself from falling by kicking the air, which sent him accidentally crashing towards Enel, who had just recomposed himself from the hit. How is he fighting in the air? Captain San has become capable of using an air walking technique, Robin replied, causing him to look at her in astonishment. After a moment they turned back to the battle, where Luffy avoided getting hit by the trident by kicking the air, though he again used a lot more leg force than necessary, so it sent him crashing into the nearest giant tree. She sweat dropped. Though he isn't very good at it, she added after a moment. He nodded a few times. Back at the battlefield, Enel appeared behind Luffy, who was trying to free his head from the tree trunk. He stabbed forward with his trident and Luffy used his observation haki to dodge the stab. Because Enel also used observation however, he anticipated the dodge, so he struck differently. What happened then was that Luffy was stabbed on the side with one of the trident's teeth. He managed to avoid the worst however. His opponent removed the trident from his body and prepared to strike him again, but Luffy hardened his head with armament haki and pulled it out and struck Enel in the chest with his Gomu Gomu no backwards bell or something of the sort. Enel crashed down into the ruins and Luffy turned around and jumped after him. After a few moments Enel rose up again, though this time he had some trouble. He spat out more blood. "Yahahaha, I got you," he announced arrogantly, like he had already won with that single stab. He pointed at Luffy. "Oh, that?" Luffy asked as he lifted the fabric of his cardigan on his left side, revealing a nasty-looking wound, from which blood flowed freely. The three Straw Hats winced upon seeing this. Nami covered her mouth with her hand in shock. "Don't think you've won by giving me such a small wound." Luffy continued mockingly. "I barely even feel that." "Small wound," he says, Nami muttered in disbelief. "If you're God, then shouldn't you have killed me by now?" Luffy asked and smirked. "Instead you brag about getting one hit in." He took a step forward. "I'm still standing," he added. Enel gritted his teeth and attacked again. This time, Luffy dodged the attempted stab again, but then gripped the golden weapon with his right hand and stretched back his left arm and armored it. "Gomu Gomu no pistol," he announced and punched forward. Enel concentrated too much on getting the trident from Luffy's hand, so when he noticed what Luffy was about to do, he had no time to avoid the punch. Subsequently, he was sent flying. Without his weapon, Luffy looked at the golden trident and smirked. "Nice stick," he commented, "I think I'll keep it." By now, Enel was struggling to even stand. He spat out more blood and clutched his chest. Wiper watched in disbelief. Just how powerful is this man? He thought. All the warriors who have encountered Enel so far have been defeated effortlessly, including Kamakiri, and yet. "D don't think this is over, my insolent mortal," Enel growled. He seemed to have trouble speaking. Luffy laughed. "No it isn't," he replied. He threw the trident back to his enemy, which caused half of the observers to freak out. Most notably perhaps, Nami. "Why did you do that?" she shouted from the behind him. Zoro shook his head. "It's honor," he told her. He is allowing Enel to fight with his chosen weapon. She sighed and face palmed in irritation. Enel caught the weapon and then lightning surrounded it. "Gloam paddling," he announced. Everyone looked at the god in anticipation of what he was about to do. The weapon turned back into a staff and everyone blinked in confusion. Then the lightning surrounded it again and after a moment, he somehow started shooting tiny bits of gold from it at Luffy. Luffy dodged the approaching bits of gold that shot towards him with super speed, intended to pierce his body. Luffy kept swaying left and right, easily dodging most of them. A few pierced his clothes, but none of them could hit him. "How is he doing that?" Nami asked in shock. "It seems that's what mastering observation haki means." Zoro replied, however he was shocked as well by Luffy's display. After a few moments of dodging, Luffy decided that it was enough. He activated his Soru and lunged forward, twisting and stretching his arm behind him. "Armament, Gomu Gomu no," he announced. A gold bullet brushed his shoulder, but he ignored it. "Rifle." He completed the attack name and struck Enel in the chest with the powerful technique. His foe collapsed on the ground. 47. Flawless victory. After defeating Enel, Luffy proceeded to ring the golden bell. Wiper tried to stop him, but he had already took off in the air. Of course, he still hadn't mastered the air walking technique, so he kept crashing into random trees, ruins and above the forest, the beanstalk. If he wasn't rubber, he'd be seriously damaged from that. Below them, Robin finally explained to Wiper the other reason for why they came to the sky, which was to ring the bell so that the descendant of Norland would hear it, and after hearing it, Wiper was moved enough that he stopped being hostile to them. Usopp stayed on the ship and took care of so it arrived on the agreed place. Sanji apparently followed after Nami and Isa after they were chased away by the giant snake in an effort to protect them, but he was too slow, so he arrived after everything was over and done. Which Zoro mocked him for. Of course, Sanji couldn't stay quiet and retorted that he was just saying that because he still hadn't awakened his haki. Zoro told him that he awakened it as well, which happened during his brutal fight with the strongest of the priests. Which wasn't that surprising. After all, their training of observation haki together was true brutality. Neither of them held back anything when swinging the bat, so it was imperative to dodge as much as possible using their senses. Regardless, after this and a few other mean comments, their conversation turned into a fight. The fight surprisingly wasn't stopped by the navigator, but by the archaeologist, since the navigator was busy sulking over there not being any gold in the City of Gold. When she was eaten by the giant snake, she found some gold in there, but she concluded that it wasn't enough. It wasn't 1 billion or more. Not even close. Nevertheless, she planned to tell Luffy to knock the snake out so they could collect it. Speaking of the snake, it woke up, but to the great relief of everyone present, she didn't start trashing around. On the contrary, the snake seemed to be taking extra care not to break anything in the ruined city. Or that was how it looked like. It seemed happy and started looking all over Shandora, ignoring the people. The archaeologist went to continue exploring the ruins and checking over the damage done in the fight. Although Luffy was partly responsible for that, she decided not to hold it against him, since he did not do it intentionally and actually prevented a few ruins from being destroyed before the fight. Zoro leaned on the nearest ruin and fell asleep after his argument with the cook, who was now trying to calm down the navigator. Having learned and tested his flying blade attacks, he was content. Though Luffy told him that his names for them were boring. Chopper was out, but he was checked over and bandaged by the archaeologist. Before she continued exploring, he was left alongside Zoro. Iso was glad that Enel was done, but was sad about everyone who was hurt. But then, Lackey found her and she knew that all would be okay. Other contestants in the survival game also started regaining consciousness. How they were alive nobody knows. Konis was glad to see that her Blue Sea friends were okay, but saddened when reminded of her father. Pagaya however was somehow still alive and found his way to her after a while. Gonfal and Pierre took off and located the imprisoned enforcers and freed them, and after that they went to locate both of the previously warring sites, who had just joined together in an effort to escape the island. Before he could reach any of them however, a bell started ringing. After finally reaching it, Luffy used a Gomu Gomu no Giganto pistol to ring the bell, though he didn't use very much force so as to not destroy it. It was still enough to send it falling down however. After hearing the bell, both sides of the war knew that their 400 years of fighting were over. It must have meant that Enel had been beaten too, but despite that they still stayed on their ships, not willing to take any chances. Speaking of Enel, he, after regaining his consciousness, quickly ran with the power of lightning, quite literally, to find his flying ship. He might have planned to use his Raigo, Thunder Greeting, to try and kill everyone and everything, but after nearly getting a heart attack, not that it would kill him since he's lightning anyway. When Luffy appeared underneath his ship and stole a lot of his backup jet dials, he must have decided against trying anything. He left with his ship, while mumbling something about going to Fairy Verth. After hearing the bell ringing, the huge snake Nola cried. Several south birds flew from the upper yard forest, heading towards the sound. Back on the blue sea, Mont Blanc Cricket, Masira and Shoju looked in the sky together when they heard the ringing. Cricket thought that perhaps now it was time to start chasing some other ridiculous legend. And he was sure that his two fans would no doubt agree with him on that. After a while and after being informed by Gonfal that it was safe to return to their homes, the two previously warring sides returned to their homes. However, many Skylanders wanted to see the enforcers, who were confirmed to be mostly okay, and the Shandians wanted to find their warriors in Isa. Thus, a temporary truce was established. A truce that would ultimately lead to peace. After all the sides met and everything was explained and everyone's wounds were bandaged, a party broke out. It became clear that nobody would fight anymore, not even the previously aggressive snake. Usopp and Luffy managed to get a lot of different dials from the people, trading rubber bands, Usopp, and some of the jet dials, Luffy. Luffy had also collected a few of the axe and impact dials along the way from the fallen enforcers. Usopp got every one of the ordinary dials, while Luffy traded for a few flame dials, a breath dial. After all, releasing a fart in an opponent's face would be priceless. He also got the dial he was most excited about, the reject dial, though the man who traded it to him kept warning him about its deadliness. In the morning, Nami decided that they will enter the snake's stomach while it was still sleeping and steal the gold. Luffy refused to comply, knowing that there was more gold to be found. He only hoped that the people would be willing to give them some, but he thought they might. Gold was, after all, neither known nor valued as much here in the sky. A few minutes later, a short distance from most of the Straw Hats, a joined force of both Skylanders and Shandians pulled the golden bell back to the upper yard soil. Robin watched as they observed the bell and the poneglyph. After a while, she chose to appear. "What does it say?" somebody asked. The Shandian chief shook his head. She walked past the onlookers towards the bell. "Something best left unknown," he replied. "We have only." "Keep thy motives in heart." With closed mouth, she interrupted, startling everyone. "We are those who will weave history," she continued, with the ringing of the great belfry. He gasped. "How do you know these words?" he asked. She didn't stop to look at him and continued walking past him. "They were inscribed on the ruins of Shandora," she answered. "You've been charged with guarding this for generations, correct?" "You mean to say that you can read the writing?" the chief asked in disbelief. Several onlookers gulped. "Possessing the name of a god, the ancient weapon, Poseidon," she replied. "It tells of its location." Several people started talking at once. She said it was a weapon. Ancient weapon, what's that? Why would it say that? She didn't answer as she was deep in thought. Another weapon, she mused, different from the one in Arabasta. She turned to leave when someone told her that was not all. He pointed at the smaller inscription in the gold, next to the poneglyph. She turned and immediately, her eyes widened. Gold D. Roger? She gasped out. She read the rest of the inscription. I have come here and will lead this passage to you world. Pirate, Gold D. Roger, the Pirate King? She spoke. So he did come to the Sky Island, just as Luffy said. But what does this inscription mean? More importantly, how was he able to use the writing? After a while, her shock only increased, as she realized that he must have meant what she is searching for, the Rio poneglyph. Outwardly she didn't show it, but she was excited. Her dream was a step closer. Flashback. You had your own reasons to comply with Crocodile, what were they? Protection. And the chance to see the poneglyph of Arabasta. I'm searching for the Rio poneglyph. I can offer you both if you want. She smiled, then she turned around. Chief, this poneglyph has already fulfilled its duty, she told him. Its duty? He repeated. She turned back to the poneglyph and considered her findings. You mean? The chief started after a moment, interrupting her from her thoughts. Our duty has been fulfilled? Tears started gathering in his eyes. We don't have to fight any longer, he asked. I see, our ancestors' wish has been fulfilled. He fell on his knees. A few of his men became concerned, but he was good, he was glad, relieved. However, such an emotional moment can only exist undisturbed for so long. Everyone turned the heads in the direction of the voice. What's that? Someone asked. Then something crashed in the nearby tree. Robin barely resisted the sudden urge to face Palm, already knowing who it was. Everyone looked at the tree trunk, where a certain rubberman was stuck. Again, said Rubberman proceeded to get his little head from the tree trunk and then fell down on the ground, causing many of the observers to wince. After a while he got up again and looked around. Oh, Robin. Weird Osan. Luffy chirped out in greeting. Robin lifted a hand in greeting, while Gonfall shook his hand at his nickname. So you found the poneglyph, Robin? He asked with a grin after he noticed what was underneath the bell. She nodded, but also noted in her mind that Luffy had said the word correctly. That's great, he announced cheerfully. He looked at the bell, and the bell is made out of gold. How cool is that? She smiled. How much do you think it's worth? He asked her, her eyes widened. Luffy, we can't take this, it belongs to, she started. Actually, the chief interrupted her. We can't give you the bell, but you can take the support pillar there. Luffy grinned. Really? He asked. Many of them nodded. That's a great idea, someone said. After all, we need to repay your crew for all you've done here. That's great. Nami went to take the gold that was in the snake's mouth, but this is worth much, much more than that. Snake's mouth? Everyone asked. Luffy nodded. Yeah, Nami was eaten by the giant snake while we were fighting and she found some gold in there, he continued. Everyone's sweat dropped. Why would anyone willingly enter a giant animal's mouth? So we can take this? Luffy asked. The chief nodded and smiled. You did defeat Enel for us, he replied. And we won't miss the gold. It's not worth very much here on Skypiea, you see. Luffy grinned. Then we'll gladly accept the gold. Robin answered with a smile. The chief ordered the able-bodied men to wrap the gold in some sort of giant paper or something. Luffy presumed it was to conceal it, but he could help but think that the Skypans were way too optimistic if they thought their crew could take all of the pillar. By the way, kid, you remind me of Roger, you know. Gonfall commented after watching the Skylanders prepare the Straw Hats gift for them. You give off the same air that he did. Luffy turned to him with a wide-eyed expression. Really? He asked. I remind him of the Pirate King? After that he grinned. I am AD as well. My name is Monkey D. Luffy. He continued after a few moments. Maybe that's the reason. We Ds are quite similar, or so I hear. The knight's eyes widened for a split second before he also smiled. A name with a D? He asked. I see, it suits you, I think. Luffy laughed. Robin looked at him. What do you know about the will of D, Captain San? She asked him. He pouted. Again with the Captain San, he grumbled. She shook her head. You're the first pirate captain to dislike being called captain, she told him. He looked at her with a raised eyebrow. You know, there's only 7 of us so far, he told her. There's really no need for formalities. She shrugged. I guess you're right, she finally admitted. Mind telling me now, Luffy? He chuckled after she emphasized his name. Well, I don't know much about it, he admitted after a while. Just that Ds tend to cause massive global-sized changes. He smirked. I guess I've already caused some of those, he said after a while. After all, I'm pretty sure Arabasta, Drum and Kokoyashi trust me way more than the government right now. I hope that doesn't change once my father is revealed. You know, Robin said after a few moments. You said that I was mysterious, Luffy, but I think you're the greatest mystery in this crew. He looked at her with a thoughtful expression. Is that so? He asked her. I'm not the only one who thinks so, she told him. The crew has also been talking about you a lot. He sighed, and, he asked. They're concerned about you. About what happened to you. She answered. Luffy, why do you have nightmares? Isn't it normal for people to have nightmares? He asked her. She shook her head. Not if you have them so often, she told him. He opened his mouth to say something, but refrained from it. What happened to you? She asked again. He shook his head. Like I said, I can't tell you anything yet, he replied. You know, the only reason nobody else has said anything is because Swordsman-san forbade them, she told him. He looked at her with widened eyes. Does he know anything? Luffy shook his head. When we first met, I've told him that I'll explain anything once our crew's main positions are filled. He answered after a while. She nodded. So he doesn't actually know anything? She asked. He shook his head. She sighed. You can't keep this from your crew forever, you know, she told him. He looked at her. I don't intend to. A few minutes later, Luffy and Robin marched alongside the golden pillar, which was being carried by the Skypians. After seeing them approach, the rest of the Straw Hats, who were carrying bags of treasure, proceeded to run away, thinking it was some sort of cannon. Hey guys! Luffy yelled. Stop! They seemed not to hurt him, so he shook his head, earning a chuckle from his companion. He activated his Soru and dashed ahead, quickly catching up to them. Hey, what are you guys doing? He asked. What does it look like, shithead? Sanji yelled. We're running. Luffy chose to ignore the comment and instead asked for a, why? Don't you see that cannon thing? Usopp yelled. It's not a cannon. Luffy whined. Everyone stopped. Luffy started looking into their bags. What especially caught his eye was the sword that was in Sanji's bag. He picked it up, looking in wonder at its golden design. Then he unsheathed it and looked at the blade. His face fell as he noticed that the blade was beaten up and ruined by time. Unsurprisingly, he reached into Usopp's bag and pulled out a golden ring with a ruby in it and put it on his right index finger. He looked at it. Looks cool. Hey, Nami yelled. You better not take that ring. Luffy looked at her with a raised eyebrow after pulling the crown out of Chopper's bag and putting it on his head. Seriously, Nami? He deadpanned. You're going to annoy me for taking one little ring after getting you all that gold? She gained a tick above her eye. What gold did you get us? She shouted with razor-sharp teeth. We got this ourselves. You refused to go, remember? Luffy grinned. I was talking about that gold. Luffy chirped out cheerfully and pointed at the approaching giant object. TT, that's all gold leaf. He nodded. All their jaws fell on the ground. If that's all gold, it's way more than a billion, she stuttered. He nodded. Her eyes turned into berry. Nami, from now on, we're billionaires, he told her and grinned. What she did next was totally unexpected. Hey, Luffy, she called. Free hug. She hugged him and Luffy returned the hug while chuckling. Everyone gaped at her. Sanji was sulking. Why does Luffy get to hug the beautiful Nami Swan? He said in his depressed state. Luffy's sweat dropped. Hopeless Sanji. He thought. We become the richest crew in paradise and that's all you think about. She let go of him. Sanji-kun. She chirped out cheerfully. Free hug. Immediately he jumped up to hug her, his mood changing completely. Hey, love cook, stop groping her ass. Zoro commented. Sanji glared at him with his only visible eye as he let go of her rear. Oh, I'm so happy I don't even care, Nami yelled out in joy as she released him and went to hug Chopper, whom she nearly crushed with her hug. If you're so happy, why don't you forgive my debt? Zoro asked her with a smirk. Usopp stared at him with a, you're so asking for it, expression. Humph. Like Nami-san would do that, Sanji smirked. Done, Nami shouted. Everyone's eyes bulged out. After a moment Luffy smirked. Hey, Nami, I need a few billion for expenses, he told her. Everyone looked at him in horror. Luffy, you're so dead. Usopp thought while he was being crushed with a hug. As long as you use them well, Captain. Nami announced. Everyone's jaws dropped into the ground, even Luffy's. Wow, she is really happy. Chopper announced. For a moment there I thought Luffy was a goner. After a while, Nami went running towards a very bewildered-looking Robin to give her a hug as well. When the gift arrived to the ship, the Straw Hats quickly learned, when comparing the pillar and the ship, that there was no way they were going to get all that on board. Half of it was the most they could possibly fit and even that was stretching it. Luffy quickly put himself and Zoro to use as they started to cut the golden pillar into smaller and smaller pieces and then put them in large wooden boxes that the Skylanders were kind enough to bring. Many were also put into the big paper thing that the pillar was previously wrapped into. After all, it wouldn't be good if they just left them lying on the deck without any kind of concealment. Overall, after many hours of near slave labor, they managed to fit roughly half of the gold on the pirate ship, going merry. Do you wish to know how much gold they got? Yes, I bet you do.